Welcome back to Around the World in a Bowl of Soup. This week, I'm excited to present to you Mirok from Skewer's Food Truck. He is bringing a delicious, rich, hearty, flavorful soup to us all this week that is packed full of just richness, and that's really the base of it. So after a long day of skiing or playing out in the snow or in the cold, this is one that'll just coat your ribs and get you all nice and full and comforted. One of my favorite things about what Mirok is doing is that it's just this wonderful meatball that a lot of cultures actually do celebrate, like a meatball soup, right? It's in Hispanic cultures, Italian cultures, and Mirok's own Armenian culture, which is what we're celebrating in this recipe. Another one of my favorite ingredients that he's using is the Aleppo pepper. This pepper is one of my favorites. I learned about it from a chef about 10 years ago, and I've had it in my cabinet, my spice cupboard, for at least that long. It's rich, it's almost oily, it's not super spicy. It does have a nice warming flavor to it, but I add this to anything. You can top things with it after they come out of the oven, so like roasted vegetables with just a little sprinkling of the Aleppo, just kind of make it pop. Give it this slight smokiness, this rich, oily, peppery feel. And then I love using it in spaghetti sauce, any rich soup, anything that you want some vibrancy and some nice, almost like I said, smokiness to it, but not like super smoky like you would on the grill. So he's using that in this, and I hope that you can source and find some, order it online. I know it's available there, and start adding it to your recipes.
Hello, my name is Mira Kazanjian. I'm the owner and operator of Skewer's Food Truck, where we do Middle Eastern street food. But today we're going to be doing some home cooking. So I'm going to be making a meatball and yogurt soup. We have 2 cups of bulgur, which is a cracked wheat. And you can find bulgur at most Middle Eastern stores and also at some specialty world market. I have half an onion added to 2 cups of bulgur. I'm going to add 1 pound of ground beef to that. And I'm using a 90% lean. So I'm going to add some salt. About a teaspoon's worth. So in Armenian cooking, the kind of common phrase that we use is achki chapo, which means you measure it by your eye. So I have some salt, pepper, and then I'm going to add a red pepper as well. So this is going to be one ingredient that we use, that I use a lot. So this is called Halebi biber, or Syrian Aleppo pepper. It's a pepper that is unique to the region of Aleppo, Syria, which is where my father was actually born. And it's very distinct. It has a good spicy kick to it, but it has kind of a deeper flavor. And then I'm going to add 1 egg. I have the bulgur, onions, eggs, meat, salt, pepper, and the red pepper, the halebi biber. I'm going to put my hand in the cold water, get it nice and cold and moist. And I'm just going to start mixing in. Feel the grains in your fingers as you're squeezing through, but it stays nice and dense. So we're going to start getting the soup portion ready. So I'm starting with yogurt, just using plain yogurt. It doesn't have to be Greek yogurt or anything thick. You want it to be a little bit runny. We're making a soup after all. So one of the things that makes this recipe a little bit tricky is that yogurt, as it heats up, it can curdle. So it's about being very careful with how we heat it up and be very gentle with the yogurt so it doesn't break up into chunks. 2 tablespoons of dried mint. This is another one of those unique ingredients, unique spices, and you can find it at Middle Eastern stores. You can also find it at some specialty stores as well. You don't want to be using fresh mint necessarily. Dry mint just has a different taste and texture. And then I'm going to be adding a little bit more again of the Syrian red pepper, halebi biber, and again, it's kind of by your taste how spicy you want it. So again, a little bit of salt, achki chapo, and then a little bit of pepper again. And then one more egg. So the egg will help the yogurt stay intact and not break up as we're heating it up. So I'm going to give this a mix just until everything is incorporated, especially that egg. And I'm just going to let this rest while we get the meatballs rolling. So here is what's going to make this meatball very special. So we're going to stuff the meatball. There's a couple different ways to stuff the meatball. One of the common ways is to actually stuff it with a fried ground beef with some pine nuts or seasonings. We're going to stuff it with butter. Now, if you're trying to be a little bit more healthy minded, you can skip this step. However, adding butter adds a little treat inside the meatball. So as the meatball is cooking, the butter will cook inside of it, and every time you break into the meatball, it'll just burst with flowing yummy butter. So I'm just gonna cut it about pea size. I'm gonna take these butter chunks and I'm gonna put it in my measuring cup. You can put it in a little plate or a cup. And I'm just gonna stick it in the freezer just for a few minutes to get it nice and hard and cold. That way it'll be easier when adding it to the meat. I have this nifty little meatball maker. All right, so that gives us some consistent meatballs. Okay, so I'm gonna shape these meatballs nice and round. So remember, we're still gonna add the butter, so it doesn't have to be perfect just yet. And so if you don't have one of these contraptions, I kept a little bit of meat here to show you the same idea. It's just I'm kind of squeezing it as I make the meatball because that keeps it nice and dense, and then I'll roll it. So cold water will help with this part as well, keeping your hands nice and cold and wet. While we're stuffing the meatball, I'm gonna put 4 cups of chicken broth in my pot and just start getting it warm. We don't want it to be boiling. We're gonna start stuffing our meatballs. So you want your butter nice and frozen. It'll make this part a lot easier. You're just gonna push it into the meat, and then once it's in there, just close it up and roll the meatball back up so it stays nice and closed. Let's do that. All right, so we have our chicken broth. It is nice and hot, not boiling, just slight little bubbles at the back. So we're gonna add our yogurt, and our yogurt is still cold. So remember, we have 32 ounces of yogurt, 1 egg, salt, pepper, red pepper. So we're gonna add this, and this is gonna drop the temperature back down. One of the keys is we don't want the yogurt to ever get to that boil, because that's when it's gonna start to break apart. So as the yogurt and chicken broth mixture is heating up, we want to avoid a boil. So as we see it start bubbling, we're gonna bring the temperature back down using none other than some more butter. So like I said, we're gonna have plenty of opportunities to add butter, and you can avoid this. You can just do cold water, or you could keep some of that chicken broth separate as cold. But the idea is we want it to simmer, but we don't want it to get to boil. Okay, so now that the yogurt mixture is nice and hot, I'm gonna add the meatballs. And I'm just gonna gently add them and then just let them simmer for about 10 minutes until they're cooked. So keep mixing it, and remember, we don't want the yogurt to get to a boil. So it's been about 10 minutes that the meat is in the yogurt mixture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna set it aside and let it stay warm back there. And while that's happening, I'm actually gonna heat up more butter in a pan. So I have about 3 tablespoons of butter melted here and bubbling. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of the halloumi biber, the Syrian red pepper, and I'm going to let that melt in the butter. And you can sound fancy and say you're going to add some pepper infused butter. Add one more meatball there. And then I'm going to put a little bit more of the mint. And then I will also add some of that infused butter. So in Armenian we say Anushala, which means enjoy your food.